Hello and welcome to episode 186 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the 25th of April 2017. My name is Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by Tom Francis.
Hello.
And Tom Senior.
Hello.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
On the eve of the storm.
The storm is here to claim us all.
I think it's stopped now, or at least I can't see it out the window.
It's because the curtains are closed, Tom.
But I can see through the curtains.
Okay.
Unique vantage.
I see. I see. I didn't understand that your perspective was not mine. As I've learned something that even a 2-year-old knows. From your perspective, the curtains are evil.
I was going to do that, but
it doesn't make any sense. There's no joke there. So indeed, what would
so
you?
I stopped, and yet.
And yet. So yeah, we are in the midst of a summer hailstorm that is the most exciting thing that's happened in Bath today.
Generation.
In more exciting news than the fact that it's a bit wet outside, we have a great big gollop of news deposited on the internet today.
Yes. Julian Gollop has announced he's making an XCOM-like game and launched the crowdfunding thing for it, which is on Fig, which is the sort of indie game funding Kickstarter type thing that is partially backed by Double Fine, or sort of launched in conjunction with Double Fine. I don't know. And it's called Phoenix Rising. Extreme podcast voice.
That was the podcast voice of a generation. Do you want me to
Phoenix
check?
Uprising. Yeah. I'll continue describing it while you Google it. And it's much like XCOM, but it's set in a post-apocalypse. And the apocalypse is not that aliens invaded, it's that a long dormant disease in some melted ice came out and, I don't know, wiped everyone out. But also turned people into mutants that are partially animals and partially humans and maybe a bit cyborg. But then the trailer says, we didn't realize until too late that they were alien. And so I guess they're alien mutant animal beasts.
Given that alien viruses trapped in ice that do weird things to people is literally quite a big X-Files plot point. And there is an XCOM, owed something to, I guess, X-Files alien invasion stuff. I think that's probably why it's called X something, I imagine. There seems to be there's a link there. It's still rooted firmly in 90s alien invasion theory territory. It's called Phoenix Point, by the way.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't know how long I could string that out.
And the fact that the Earth is kind of pre-ruined means that there's a whole bunch of, I think, semi-tribal factions that you have to deal with, and so there's a diplomacy aspect to it, I think. And the trailer they launched looks very much like XCOM 2, XCOM the recent Firaxis XCOM and XCOM 2, where it's kind of cinematic and 3D. I don't actually know how in-game that stuff is. And it's a very kind of cinematic trailer in that there's sort of big monster reveals in it. Some of the monsters look one of the monsters looks a lot like a Mirelurk from Fallout. The kind of hunt shell things. And then there's really, really big one with a tiny human head that made me laugh out loud when I saw it.
I mean, actually, the whole post-apocalyptic thing makes me think of Fallout, not just modern Bethesda Fallout, but traditional sort of isometric squad tactic strategy Fallout.
Yeah. I feel like XCOM 2 beaten to a punch a little bit in terms of the looks like a strong theme of this is that you're kind of a ragtag group of rebels, and that's very much what XCOM 2, at least that's the difference between XCOM 2 and XCOM 1, was that it was more about an improvised defense than a well-organized military. The other thing they showed is that that Mirelurk type enemy, they showed a whole load of variants on it, where on this one his right arm is a machine gun, on this one it's like a big armored thing, and they say that the enemies will adapt to your tactics. So I guess I'm assuming, I don't know actually, when I heard it I assumed that meant sort of between missions, you got a lot of headshots on that mission, so now they're putting on
big heads
their
or
tougher
smaller
heads.
heads.
They're getting rid of that tiny human head.
Yeah. Well, no, that'd be a good thing to have. If you have a huge body and a tiny head, you're probably less vulnerable to headshots.
Maybe the ultimate move is to remove their heads entirely so they can't be shot.
The only winning move is not to play.
Yeah.
The game of having a head.
That's what Headlander is all about. I'm not mega optimistic about, well, I don't know. I'm actually just very colored by something that, came up in an interview, our friend Alex Wiltshire did with the creator of, top-down game where you have like a bunch of soldiers fighting off waves and waves of insecty enemies, and you have to kind of capture different points and stuff. Infested Planet.
Right.
And he wrote a system for having the enemies adapt to your tactics. And like, you know, if you use a load of flamethrowers, then fire resistant enemies come. And it was quite easy to get that working, and it was just no fun at all. It was just like, well, whatever you try doesn't work. And so he changed it so that they just randomly, prepare for different tactics. So they're just like, this wave is all fire resistant. And they didn't do that because you used fire extinguishers. They just chose that randomly. And that becomes way more interesting, he says. So I actually I'm only speaking from secondhand, design thinking, but that guy reckoned that it was actually a waste of time to try and have enemies respond, like adapt to your tactics, because it's actually not, it's realistic and intelligent for the enemies to do that, but it's not actually that much fun.
You should say as well that if people aren't familiar with Fallout, when we say Mirelurk, what we mean is a crab man. And when we talk about, you know, it essentially the options were like big crab claw, little crab claw, Gatling gun.
Something like that.
Yeah.
As the song goes.
Yeah, indeed. I don't know to what extent those things could be considered as responses to different strategies employed by the player.
They're attacking us. Deploy the bigger claw. No, it's not enough. Deploy the gun.
These are the only two ideas we have as crabs.
There were other adaptations, but I can't remember what they were.
But that's what I mean, is it seemed more like variants on like the enemy type. Like you fight a platoon of them and you get like two big claws, one little claw, one Gatling gun.
Cardboard box.
Yeah, and then a cardboard box.
Metal Gear Solid 5 had some kind of adaptive enemy kit, didn't it? Although I think it wasn't so much, I don't think they put on hats because you got all the headshots. It was more like there was a shipment of hats, and if you took that out, then they would have no hats, and then you could do loads of headshots.
Yeah, there was a passive escalation that you could disrupt with kind of side missions and things. It wasn't responsive directly. It's kind of not the most interesting thing about this game for me. Like, I like the idea of having loads of human factions in a post-apocalypse scenario. That's the really cool idea. And I wonder to what extent you could form alliances with them, which is a thing that is not in XCOM, any XCOM game. Like, it feels like there's room there for new kind of ways to make an XCOM game. And I wish that, the way it kind of looked and sounded felt more like its own thing, rather than like, it looks and sounds a lot like the Firaxis XCOM games. But I'm still quite excited about the idea of an alternative take on the same idea.
For sure. Yeah, I think you're right that not having strict good guy, bad guy. I mean, obviously, I'm imagining crab people are going to be the bad guys. I've been wrong before.
Don't rush to judgment, Chris. From my perspective, the crab guys are good.
From my perspective, the crab guys are fantastic. But nonetheless, that does seem to be the way that you can make an XCOM campaign more interesting over time, I guess, by adding some of that grand strategy stuff. Grand crab strategy. Also in the news this week, Sega are gently teasing, or explicitly teasing, maybe as far as saying that Vanquish, another Platinum game, is making its way to PC. And given that they're using the recently announced and released Bayonetta as a vehicle for teasing this, which is also a Platinum game, this seems like a very true thing that is occurring, not a rumor for no reason. It's not something you would spread around unless it was happening.
Indeed. And it's incredibly exciting.
It is.
To have the beautiful, extraordinarily insane, weirdly political shooter, the third-person shooter, like the ultimate reaction to Gears of War.
Yeah.
That is Vanquish. Just an extraordinary feast of absurd blaster action with amazing bosses. It's
what I keep thinking I've talked about on the podcast, but I think I've just written a bunch about it in other contexts, because obviously it was a console game for the longest time. But it's of that same generation as Bayonetta, of sort of just brilliant Platinum games that find a way of making every other game in their genre look boring. So Vanquish is fundamentally a third-person cover shooter from the era where every game was a third-person cover shooter, except the thing you should never ever do is be behind cover, because you have rocket knees. And they've basically taken the roadie run from Gears of War, the sort of like head down sort of crouching sprint that you use to get between cover safely, and said, well, what if that wasn't a sort of a squat jog, but was in fact a man in a Pete Townsend knee slide, but with rocket-powered knees, skidding across the ground? And what if every time you leapt out of cover, you went into bullet time? So that when you're going into cover is boring, but coming out of cover is amazing. So it's just about chaining together these sort of leaps from cover that go into bullet time into a rocket-powered knee slide to the next bit of cover, and then you don't even want to stop there, ideally. You want to just bounce off that piece of cover to trigger bullet time again and keep going. It's brilliant. It's when Tom, when you said weirdly political, you're referring to the fact that it's implicitly set in a future where Hillary Clinton is president.
Yes, which is amazing in today's modern context as well.
Yes, it is.
So yeah, it's taken on a whole new random resonance.
The game begins with horror as essentially space Vladimir Putin's space army of robots and people who look a lot like Vladimir Putin but in skin-tight nano armor take over a space station and use a laser to melt San Francisco, and it only manages to escalate from there. Your best friend is a giant man called Robert Burns, and it's never addressed why he's called Robert Burns. And actually, like Bayonetta, it's a game that never really stops escalating. It's more controlled than Bayonetta. It's not as out and out kind of mad camp. It feels like a very fun, obviously Platinum are probably one of the more fun developers in any genre, but taking on a very kind of Western game archetype, which is the Space Marine cover shooter, and kind of spectacularly making it their own thing.
Fantastic. Can't wait to play that on PC.
Yeah. I mean, the first mission in that game is going to involve capital ships full of Marines crashing into having an Omaha Beach moment, but vertically up a space station before fighting giant colossal spider robots, and that's the tutorial, pretty much. It's great. I'm really pleased that it's coming out on PC.
So good.
That'd be if they do what they did with Bayonetta, and it's a good enough port to be 60 frames a second, support for modern resolutions. That's going to look tip top. It's good news.
Word.
Tom, what have you been playing?
I actually did play a bit of XCOM 2, coincidentally before this announcement, because I was playing it a bit in Seattle. I got it on my PS4, and I talked a bit before about this, but like I almost can't get through a turn now without something going wrong with the way it communicates information to me, or the way the rules seem to work versus how they do work. Like I mind controlled a Viper, which was great. And then anytime you mind control an enemy, the most exciting thing is to look at what their abilities are, because you can use all the abilities that they can use against you normally. And for a Viper, it didn't have like the lick someone attack. They can kind of like coil around you. They do something with it. But it did have a venom spit thing. And so I spent ages carefully aligning the preview of what it was going to hit so that it would hit these two enemies, and then fired it, and there's some kind of effect, but it didn't hit either of them, and the preview told me it would hit both of them, and that was really kind of crucial. Like if that wasn't going to work, that's fine, but I needed to know that so I could do something else with that Viper and use him as like cannon fodder, or get him in a different situation, or do something else with those two enemies. And just because the stakes are so high, like every single thing that doesn't happen exactly as you expect it to is disastrous. And so I did what I've generally been doing whenever it's not my fault that something went wrong and I reloaded my save game. But on PS4, that takes like 5 minutes.
Was it kind of like a grenade marker? I'm not sure I've used that ability.
Yeah, it looks like, that's another thing is, some abilities you have to press actually this might be worse on a controller than it is on mouse and keyboard, I can't remember. But some abilities like a grenade or a grenade launcher, you select it, you sort of select it as if you're going to fire it, basically, and then you don't fire it, you get a preview and you can move that around to see where you're going to fire. But then a couple of abilities look like they're going to do that, but when you select it, they immediately fire in the direction your cursor currently is. And Null Lance, if you want to aim that, in order to point it in a certain direction, it's like a long line attack, pointing it in that direction also moves the camera. And so if it moves the camera past the point that you can see what you're aiming at, moving it back now changes the aim to the opposite direction. So you have to play this little dance where you're like shoving the stick one way and then the other way to try and get it to point in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't remember encountering that on PC for any abilities, but it sounds as though they've attached a kind of grenade marker to a dice roll shot with that particular thing where, which obviously they should flag if it's going to be a percentage thing. But the rest of the game tells you that if you have that dome that you're moving around and anything that glows red within that dome will definitely get hit.
Yeah,
which is like the essential thing about grenades. Is why they're so good. Guaranteed damage in that game is just fucking amazing. I think maybe they've just communicated that wrong.
Well, that dome can be a bit fiddly as well. It can freak out because of different floors in a building and things like that. And it can be you think you're in it, but not.
I'm always in that situation where there's like, okay, I can definitely hit 2 enemies, no problem, but I think I can hit the third one as well. Yeah. But that position where it's going to work is like fleeting. It goes there for a split second and then goes back again.
Yeah, definitely.
And I've had it with the stick where it's like, I have to hold the stick down for a little while and kind of like force it in that direction and then let go the second it looks like it's right.
Yeah, this is a fundamental problem with imposing a circular shape on a grid system.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, there's an inherent inaccuracy to that, you know, it's going to cause problems. Which is, my other big problem with XCOM, generally with, all XCOMs that have been made, is that a grid systems where flanking bonuses are really essential. But flanking bonuses are very specific in terms of like where you are on the grid relative to the enemy, and that's not at all intuitive. Like, I have no idea when I can get a flanking position. Like, sometimes I'm in a position where intuitively it should definitely be a flank. Like, you know, literally I can see the side of their head. But actually, because I've like maybe a couple of squares back, like it won't register as a flank. And that's essential as well, because that's how you get loads of your crit damage in XCOM. So there's loads of problems with that. Like, maybe it just moves the hexes.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Guess what? Have more sides.
Yeah. Have more sides, have more kind of granularity in that.
Well, the other way to go is into the breach, where most attacks in that game are just, one of the 4 cardinal directions. So you can literally only shoot if they're like, you know, only to your left and only to your direct front. And so there's no like diagonal attacks or angles at all, which is, you know, sounds really restrictive, but what it means is you're always 100% clear on whether you can hit, you know for sure, if I move to that space, I will be able to hit that enemy. And that's so good. It just solves all the problems that I have with XCOM.
Yeah, I mean, I wish they'd just kind of show it to you. So if you click on an enemy, I'd like to see where I can patches of ground.
There are mods for this, aren't there? There's that, there's one called Perfect Information that I think tries to give you all those previews and stuff.
Yeah.
And I probably should just play on PC and get that installed.
It feels like that's the only way that's the way to play the game. Otherwise, you're right, you do just get fucked over. And you're right as well that like when you're punished in that game, it really matters.
Yeah.
Like over the course of a campaign, I think you can bounce back in XCOM 2 more so than you can in the first game. But nonetheless, like losing a key character to a UI problem is a disaster in a game like that.
Yeah.
It feels like it needs some sort of limited takesy backsies for things like this. Like, you know, the example would be you can undo the last action you did. However, shot percentage to hits and stuff will always be the same. So if you have a limited number of them, it's not necessarily going to be worth re-rolling an 11% shot until it comes off. But like, because it's that thing of I meant to do that versus I was consciously taking a risk. Like accidentally throwing a grenade in the wrong floor of a building because the curse has gone a bit weird doesn't fit the fantasy of the game. It's not like I lost my best XCOM man because he forgot how to throw and accidentally threw a grenade directly up in the air for no reason.
Instead of throwing it like a normal human would, he threw it 3 stories higher and hit nothing
for no reason. So I feel like maybe some ways to incorporate not save scumming necessarily, but like you know, does Invisible Ink have that?
It has.
It does. That's
I was going to say it's got those like 3 rewinds or something. It depends on the difficulty level you're playing on, and also you can customize difficulty. So you can, if you like, play on like an easy difficulty with no rewinds or a hard difficulty with some rewinds. But they explicitly say in the explaining that feature that it's for misclicks. It's for when you just didn't mean to do what you did, and but it's, you know, they don't try and enforce that. Obviously, they just make it limited so that you. And I don't think I ever used it in Invisible Ink just to make something go better. It was always because I had, you know, just clicked on the wrong thing.
Yeah. Or maybe in some cases I think I used it because I genuinely wasn't... That game is usually so good about telling you what will and won't work, but occasionally you'd have just a little bit of weirdness where things wouldn't necessarily quite interact in a way that felt right or reflected what you were trying to do, and so it was worth... Like, for example, moving through a detection area where you're pretty sure you wouldn't path that way or something like that, where it's like, I definitely wouldn't have chosen to do that, so it's time to rewind it.
Yep.
That system in all games would be good. All turn-based games, at least.
I've also been playing N++, which is, for those of you keeping score, not N 1.0 and not N 2.0 and not N+. Those are all different games. But it's basically the game that MetaNet have been making for, I want to say, like 11 years. And it's weird coming back to it because I was the biggest fan of N. It would have been even pre 1.0. It would have been like N 0.6 or something, or whatever.
It was a Flash game.
Yeah, it was a Flash game on PC. It was completely free. Little grey rooms, tiny little ninja jumping around them. I mean, if that was 11 years ago, then I suppose it must have taken them some time to make the first version. But if it was around that time, because I think it was early in my career at PC Gamer, which would have been like, yeah, about that longer. So I feel like the indie game revolution hadn't happened at that time. I think it was pre World of Goo. And that was my obsession. It was like that I didn't really play anything else that was quick to play, that, didn't take up a huge amount of time, and was easy to launch. Like just a little icon on my taskbar, and I just click it and I play for a few minutes. And so I got really obsessed with it and really into it. And then I've kind of disconnected from it for a long time. I was really excited about what they would do next, and they did have other games planned, and they kept hitting difficulties and then kept returning to N. And then at some point, I think that they kind of lost me. They released N+, but it was only on PSP or something. Like it wasn't on PC anyway. And so I kind of got disconnected from the whole thing. I stopped paying attention because I couldn't play that one. And I'm only just come back to it now. Like it's probably, 7 years since then. And they've just worked on N in a ridiculous amount since then. And so it now has 4,000 levels and it's got, I was really surprised when I saw it at Fantastic Arcade, about 3 years ago or 2 years ago, and discovered that it had co-op and a race mode, which is really cool, where you are both trying to play the same level, but there are, if you blow up on a mine, that mine is gone, so it helps the person coming after you, and you restart while they carry on. But what replaces the mine is a kind of mine trigger, and if someone touches that, when they leave that spot, it becomes a mine again. And there are also lots of mine triggers just throughout the level, so things that aren't mines even when the level starts, but if you touch them, they become mines. And so you can intentionally land on that spot to prime a mine for the person coming behind you. I haven't played in the multiplayer modes because they're local multiplayer only, which is a shame. But just in the single player stuff, there's obviously way more levels than I will ever be able to play. And I'm sort of remembering why I like this game. When I stopped playing it, I was kind of thinking actually I probably only played that because, there's no other hardcore platformer I've ever really clicked with. I don't really like those kind of games, even when they're done really, really well. And so I thought maybe I only like that game because it was the only quick game to play around. But now that I get back into it, I remember, no, there's lots of reasons I like this. It has this very particular kind of momentum to it where, it actually, interestingly enough, it explains the rules in this version, and it just tells you how certain physics things works. Every time you wall jump, you gain a bit of vertical momentum. So if you're you actually get faster as you jump off things. And I don't think it explains all the nuances, but you learn these things. If you hit a jump pad and you're going really fast upwards and you just touch a wall and bounce off it, you will go so fast upwards, and also you can use that to make an incredibly long horizontal jump. And if you're falling, and you fall onto a slope that's sloping kind of away from you, you're going to be fine almost no matter what the height. If you fall on flat land, then you'll die from a certain distance. If you fall on a slope that's facing exactly the direction you're coming at it from, you're going to die unexpectedly easily. It's going to just crumple your legs. And there are, once you can kind of chain those things together, once you can kind of run into a curved corner and use that momentum to propel yourself up the wall, then wall jump over something, and then land on one of those bouncy blocks that has just the right amount of give so that it cushions your landing but also springs you back off. And then while you're doing that, like a homing missile is chasing you, and then you intentionally like skid across the ceiling so that the homing missile crashes into that, and then you arc across some like drones chasing you. It just feels really, really good. And the levels are tiny. Every level is just one screen. And the best ones, what I discovered is that I actually do like really hardcore, difficult platforms where you repeat yourself again and again and again, as long as what I'm repeating is literally 3 seconds. It can't be any longer than that. And so there are levels of end that I really don't like because there are a significant percentage of them are a very long, like, snaking path through the room with loads and loads of mines everywhere, and you have to jump really carefully over each one. And if you make a mistake on the last one, you've got to redo all of that. And there's nothing interesting about redoing it for me. Whereas the ones that are really, that involve momentum and they're really fast and have these kind of dynamic elements chasing you, you get, when you repeat that again and again and again, the thing you're repeating is really, really quick, so I don't mind it, but also you get so good at it. Like, your fluidity on that first section that you've now played, 37 times, is just like magnificent to behold. If anyone walked in on you playing it at that point, they'd be like, holy shit, how good are you at this game? If they'd seen the other 36 attempts, they would be less impressed. And so I love those kinds of levels, and I really hate the mine jumping kind of levels. And actually, it's very good about, like, doesn't really gate your progress. You can skip a whole episode. An episode is 5 rooms. And I don't think there's any limit on how many you can skip. Like, you just, you could just keep going to the end of the game. But I think within an episode, I haven't checked, but so far I haven't found a way to sort of play an individual level from an episode. So if I don't like if I hit a level I really hate in an episode, I just have to skip the rest of the episode. I don't get to play the others. Which is a bit of a shame. When you hear it as 4,000 levels, you kind of imagine, well, surely they just get really repetitive after a while. But actually, they kind of don't. I mean, like I say, there are types I don't like, but I played one the other day. It's called Neo Tokyo, and it was just looked like a whole bunch of skyscrapers with kind of windows going all the way through them, and just hundreds of tiny little drones, like, floating between those skyscrapers and going through these windows, and just look like they are kind of like hover cars going through a city. And that was really neat. And then there's other ones where, like, there's a device in this new version where it's had a big update lately, but I'm not really talking about the update because I didn't play N++ when it came out in the first place, so I don't really know what's new except 2,000 levels apparently. But there's a gizmo which I think has been in N++ since it launched, which is this weird vortex thing that when you pass through it, a short while later, you will come out of it again. Yeah. And that version of you is lethal to touch, and it will just go and do everything you did. And there are some levels where, like, a lot of levels will put that on your critical path. You can't not hit it, so you have to hit it, and part of the level is dodging your previous clone. There are some really nice ones where, like, there's one of those ahead of you, and you're going to have to go through it. There's also one of them behind you, and behind that, there's a whole bunch of gold. So if you want the gold, you've got to trigger 2 of these ghosts, and then you're going to be dodging both of those for the rest of the game. I really like that kind of stuff. And there's other ones where it's just like a really big level with loads of different, like, chambers, and each one is guarded by a different hazard, and you've got to decide which ones are worth the gold, because gold gets you extra time, and it's kind of your score as well. And they feel kind of almost open-ended. Those are pretty rare, but, like, it just gives you an idea of how much variety there can be to end levels. And also some of them are just like, they're just bits of art. Just, as soon as the level over, it's like, whoa, look at that. And it's just this beautiful kind of pattern, and actually playing the level is not especially different to anything else, but it's just really cool to look at.
Yeah, there's a real sense that it's all been handcrafted. And, I think if you're a developer with this type of game, you might be tempted to try to maybe procedurally generate that sort of level if it's just one screen. But there's very much a sense that, there's a wit behind end levels, and they
each have titles, and the titles are sometimes funny, and they sometimes actually jokes, sort of clue you into how to play it. Like one of them, one of them will just be like, temptation is fatal or something. And that's the one where you have to look really carefully about that big chunk of gold. And are you really going to go for that?
They lay loads of little traps and pitfalls in for you that only a person could do. And I think there's a kind of a way of the designers are communicating with you as you're playing through this platform that is fantastic, and even greater than something like Super Meat Boy, which is just the other game I would mention in the same category of just being amazing, just feels amazing. You just get used to the sense of momentum and motion. Very, very different type, sense of momentum to N, which has a very unusual, as you described, sense of gaining momentum as you go at walls and stuff. But Super Meat Boy's levels are beautiful and pure, but they're also longer. And I love, as you say, that room idea, that you just have a room and the room has a purpose and it's going to try and fuck you in a certain specific way. And that mechanic you mentioned where you go through like ghost mines, but then become real mines as you cross them, is a big part of a lot of like early N++ levels, where you snake up through a route and then you have to come back through it. Yeah. So you have to watch your step and not, turn those mines on, because you have to come back through that same route in order to get back to, exit the level. Yeah. It's full of all these really witty, funny, kind of clever ideas that meshes well with this just incredibly intuitively interesting platformer. I love it. Yeah, I think N's brilliant.
Oh, it was a really hard game to follow up on. I mean, I say that because they've been making M for 11 years, but yeah. Like I played loads of, it must have been the original N when I was at university, close to 10 years ago, or 10 years, 10 years ago. And so, because it was one of those games that ran on anything and was kind of amazing, but no pure platformer like that, pure sort of challenge room platformer I can think of since has actually kind of stepped into the same gap. Maybe that's for want of looking, but it feels like a genre that's almost perfectible, and a few games sort of almost got there, I think.
Yeah, I really want, I always have like a gap in my life for something I could just fire up and play just in 10 minutes, just for like a break. And any game that can fit that gap always, ends up staying in my rotation for a long time.
Any game? Good noise.
The one thing I wish they would do is, there's this mysterious option I have to rate a level, or sort of, no, I can favorite a level, that's it. And if I like hold down the right trigger, it'll tell me who the level is by and I can favorite it. And what I want to know is that seems to sort of hint to some kind of way to like filter levels or sort of pick out levels that are going to be interesting to you. And that's what I really want, is because like I say, there's one type of level I really don't like and there's one type of level I really do like, and there's a lot of variety in between that I'm interested in. I would love it if they were somehow like categorized or tagged, like the same way you can like tag, games on Steam with like, this one has a great soundtrack, this one has a female protagonist. I want end levels like, this one has a shitload of mines, and I want to filter out all of those.
Weirdly, it could do, I mean, this would be presumably doable with just that data, but like either a Steam or an Amazon based, like users who liked this level also liked.
Yeah.
And it plans your course through the game, not based on the particular progression of, chapters or sections or anything, but maybe has some sense of difficulty, and then it just progresses you to the next thing that matches all of the things that you've liked so far. That'd be an interesting way to do it. I suppose the downside to that would be eventually you would finish all of the things you like, and then you'd have 1,000 levels that you hate remaining.
Yeah, there are so many that I feel like there's probably 2,000 end levels I would love amongst the 4,000. And
do you need more than
probably
that,
never, I don't think so. The other thing actually that I wanted to say is, the pacing is kind of interesting. I haven't really gone far enough to find out how it pans out long term, but there's a kind of intro section of levels, and it's a lot. It's like 250 levels or something. And I played through those in maybe like an hour or something. And those ramp up in difficulty, and the early ones of those are, very easy and just teach you how to play the game, which is appreciated. And then the later ones of those are, about as, maybe not the absolute ceiling of viability, but very much challenging for me, and almost getting too challenging. And then when you go into the main set of levels, suddenly it's easy again. Like not quite as easy as it started out in the last chapter, but it basically ramps back down and starts from there and builds and builds and builds. And so I've done like, I think I haven't quite finished the first row, and a row is like 20 episodes or something, and the episodes are 5 levels each, so like 100 levels. Actually, it probably is that. And so far, it's just got harder and harder and harder and harder. And it's getting to the point now where I'm kind of, trepidatious about each episode. Like, oh God, what's it going to throw at me now? Because there's, like I say, there's some levels I just don't want to do at that kind of level of difficulty. And so I'm kind of hoping that when I get to the next row, maybe it'll go back to being easy for a little while again. Because I don't mind if they overall increase in difficulty, but I like just pacing wise, I don't want it to just get harder and harder and harder, for 1,000 levels.
It's good stuff, though. It's not, you got me tempted to go back to it, because you're right, that size of game that fits really well into less than a minute in some cases that you can power up and play and put down again. It's definitely something that I've not had for a decent span of time.
Yeah. We should do, we should try the local multiplayer at some point.
Yeah, I'd definitely be able to.
Good idea.
Because, there's the race mode and there's also co-op mode, and I haven't played it myself, but I watched Nerd Cubed play it, and he also doesn't have anyone to play with, so he plays both people himself with 2 controllers. And the design of those, it's not just like play the single player levels, but with 2 players. They are all custom designed for co-op, and they have that same kind of thing of the level kind of talking to you. One of them just has the switch to open the door, just has a landmine on it. And so whoever touches it dies. So one of you has to just kill yourself to destroy the landmine so that the other one can press the switch.
We could even, revisit the early days of Great Crowbar and switch on a recording for that.
Yeah, we could. That'd be really fun.
You know, we had fun doing Splunky and Gang Beasts and similar.
Yeah, I wonder how many players you can have in a race. The co-op is only 2 players, I think, but I don't know if the race ones goes up to more.
We need a commentator.
Yeah, we just have a shoutcaster.
Shoutcaster.
Just shouting.
Call the action.
A shouter. If that's the kind of thing you want, you'll be real glad that that's what we put your Patreon dollars towards. It's just Tom going, while 2 other people play a game. That's our understanding of the YouTube. What have you been playing, Tom?
I've been playing more of the Signal of Tölva.
Oh, yeah.
Which we did talk about a few weeks back, and I'd taken my first steps into the world as a fresh robot, and kind of enjoyed it, but then found it kind of at times slightly onerous to like traverse and explore. And then I would say that since then, I think I'm quite near the end now. It's just gotten better and better and better. Like so it's become more and more interesting just in terms of the sights you're seeing. I don't want to kind of like spoil the stuff that you encounter, but just like cool sci-fi shit that happens ambiently around you as you enter a new area. Like there are loads of kind of quite vivid memories that have added to my mind of that game now, just from going into a certain place at night and perhaps seeing like a giant spaceship or something sailing overhead. It's very good at incidental, awesome sci-fi stuff. And that's really exciting. And also I've kind of gotten into the weapons a lot more. I'm onto the max tier of weapons now. So I've unlocked enough lore to allow me to get the best sniper rifle, which is how video games work.
The ultimate signal was gun.
The top gun signal. And I've got this amazing sniper rifle that does astonishing amount of like one hit damage, but when you go into scope, it reverses your mouse controls.
What?
So the game is saying, do you want this trade-off?
Oh my
Are you
God.
prepared to put up with this bullshit to do the maximum amount of damage?
That sounds like something Borderlands would do. Like there's that gun in Borderlands that's amazing, but it's just really irritating. It just makes
there's
talks
that
to
sound
you.
effect that. So I've stuck with this gun now, and I mean, it's been a total mindfuck just using this one gun in this game, because you zoom in, and I've gotten used to kind of, you know how when you're tracking something you're sniping in a game, as it's running sideways across your screen, you kind of like go slightly ahead of it, and then maybe as soon as the crosshair aligns, you just click and bang. Except like you're dragging in the reverse direction, and if you have to adjust up and down at the same time, God help you.
The human brain can't do that.
You'd better get like the head level or the crit level right before you start dragging sideways. And so I've gotten good at that. The problem is coming out of scope and going back to normal totally fucks me up. I can't do it. I'll just like start like a malfunctioning robot, just start barging around in
You know what you should try actually? Because what I'm doing is I'm playing a gamepad, but when I need to snipe, I switch to mouse and keyboard. And I bet if you switch back to a gamepad, you'd probably be alright, because it would be such a different mode of control anyway. That
it would make more sense. Yeah, no, maybe so. I've not been doing that. So it's made me amazing at killing things far away, but terrible at moving around in a very basic, just
can't navigate rocks now.
Fundamental way, where I'll snipe a few things and then just really struggle to get through, a gap, man. Just a narrow gap in some rocks.
Like a sniper equivalent of a drunken master.
Yeah.
Can you rotate your mouse so the buttons are facing you, and then just hold it upside down?
Oh wow! But that would only work in one.
You flip it around when you need to move.
Okay, look in a mirror while you're doing it.
Shit, this is going to make it worse. So I think I just need to basically get better at braining this, as Fry from Futurama
that would be
might
a
say.
last resort.
You got to brain it up.
Gotta just like my brain's just gotta figure it out. But I've enjoyed that challenge alone, and also we've described before the way that I think a few of us played it, where you get these area of effect attacks, and the one I've enjoyed is the one that sends robots fleeing for cover. And enemies are actually really smart in this game. Like they know where cover is, and they know how to run away and actually get behind stuff, which frankly is fucking better than a lot of shooters that you'll play that are just dedicated shooters. So the difficulty with this is that when you hit that AoE, everything is going to go behind a rock. So it's about picking off the things that are, nearest to rock cover, and then sniping them in the back of the head with this ridiculous reverse control sniper rifle. And I'm really enjoying this very silly, but very satisfying kind of, the lasers feel amazing in this game. Like I love how they look amazing, lancing across the landscape at night, and sometimes just some friendly robots will wade in and they'll save your life because they'll just draw some fire and let you recover enough to bring to bear your ridiculous reverse control sniper rifle on, a couple of targets that are causing you trouble. I'm really enjoying it.
Are there any shotguns or grenades?
I don't believe so, actually. There are, the equivalent of the shotgun, I would say, is a kind of continuous, lightning gun.
Hose thing, yeah.
Yeah, so you hose them with lightning, and it's really powerful, but it runs out of ammo really fast. And that's really potent if you can, close in fast enough. But being as, my default is sniper rifle, I've not really had much cause to use those. I don't think there is actually a shotgun equivalent, and there aren't.
Because I think I've got sort of one of every type of weapon now, and so from the icons on the unlock menu, it looks like I'm just going to get better versions of those things.
Yeah,
but it seemed conspicuous to me that it didn't have those archetypes.
Yeah, I think it's hard to actually engineer close combat encounters in Tölva because everything is trying to move behind cover sensibly.
Well, what usually happens to me is I snipe from a distance and then everyone comes running and I snipe some of them before they get to me, but then I'm just cornered and I'm behind a rock and they're all going to come around the corner any minute. And there are weapons that are better at close range than the sniper rifle, but it feels like a ripe time for a shotgun.
Yeah, the assault rifles become not assault rifles. They're a kind of rapid fire weapons that are amazing at close range, especially later on. And the hoses are amazing. They are amazing.
Good hoses.
They hose the fuck. They're really
robot
good.
Hoses.
So those are your solutions. I tend to just run away like a big coward. I wish, the one thing I'd change about the game is I would love the ability to hire a couple of companions without having to sacrifice a weapon slot.
Right.
Because the companions are rubbish. They don't really do anything. But the sheer personality of having them around and watching them fighting with you and having them draw fire, because the game looks really cool. Just seeing robots fight each other kind of according to AI schema is really satisfying. I wish that there wasn't a kind of risk, a sacrifice I had to make to see that happen.
Because you only have 2 weapon slots, right?
Yeah.
So one of them's got to be the commando gun.
Commando gun, yeah, that takes
Fires
over.
commandos.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I'd love
Gunno
to
command.
I'd love to change, I think. And some of my favourite moments have been where there have accidentally been friendlies in the area and they've kind of opened fire from a distant ridge and I've seen lasers coming in. I'm like, holy shit, they're my guys because they're glowing yellow. And yeah, those are the coolest moments. And I feel like you can engineer those a bit more if you actually had the ability to have dudes around with you all the time. But it really gets a lot better after the first hour, I've found. And I've really enjoyed it playing it in short bursts. So it's been my lunchtime game at PC Gamer. Where we're obviously very lucky to be able to just boot up a game in an hour-long lunch break. And playing in those little hour-long chunks has been absolutely perfect for it. So you pick a base and you go and, try and attack it. And then, you get sidetracked by some resources or, your scanner will show that there's a lore blob nearby that you need to scan for the lore. So you go and scan that and then, shenanigans. And that's a good way to play that game, I think. Really enjoying it.
I finally figured out, that you can destroy the turret drop pods.
Oh yeah.
Because I saw some tooltip that just threw me completely because I thought it said that, to disable this, you need to kill the leader. I thought it was talking about the turret thing. And so I thought, okay, the turret's indestructible, but I've got to find the leader and kill the leader and then it will shut down and I'll capture it. And so one outpost, I just killed everyone and this turret is still there. and I could dodge it easily, but like I was trying to find like, where's the leader? I need to kill the leader to disable this turret thing. And I think I just misread the tooltip. I think you just got to shoot the turrets, right? You just
you hide behind a rock and just shoot them over and over again.
Allies do help with the turrets, I find.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because often you'll take a base and then suddenly the base will just like manufacture a load of allies. And that tends to be often when those turrets come down. And so you watch the turret come down and then you just let your allies do it, really, because they'll just march out and engage it straight away.
Yeah.
And the only other time you tend to see them is in like ambush spots, which are clearly marked on the map. So if you're going into those, you know that they're going to
Feel
a mistake.
somewhat undermining.
That was their first strategic error.
And also you get better health regen for taking out an ambush spot for some reason.
That's like the idea that maybe they're not even, they're not even tactically designated ambush spots. That's what they're literally called. Like that's what that place is actually, like that's its local name. It's like
Mount Ambush. Let's go there.
Exactly. We'll set our trap in Ambush Gorge. I'm glad to hear that the weapons get character, because I had the same experience with Thomas. Like I've unlocked like all the tier 2s in every category, and I was worried that it would just become, I've essentially my worry was I fired all of the guns, just not at their maximum power ratings, essentially. But it sounds like that's not the case.
Yeah, I can't speak to how that applies to the rest of the range of guns, but it's really cool that sniper rifle has that quirk.
Awesome.
What have you been playing, Chris?
So the thing I've been dipping back into this week, that I can talk about, is Elite again. This is, anyone who's listened to the podcast for any length of time will know that I just return periodically to Elite regardless of anything else. But, this was prompted by the fact that they're sort of advancing some of the story stuff along. They've just done an event where players found a mysterious derelict kind of mega ship, like not space station sized, but not miles off either, out in the reaches of space. And it's a unique asset. It's the most boring thing to say about it, but like they made it specially. The effort comes through in every ounce of story. To kind of continue one of the sort of ARG style bits of storytelling that Elite does over time. And this time they've actually done voice logs, like voice acted stuff for the game, which they haven't done before. So that's all sort of all well and good. The reason I'm interested in it partly because I like Elite and I like spaceships and I like that universe and it's just a nice place to hang out. Because of the work I'm doing now, I've become more interested professionally in the way that MMOs tell stories over time, in the way that little bits of incidental writing get picked up by players, and I think it's interesting. I think Elite is a good example of a current MMO that is using essentially ARG mechanics as a way to tell stories to players, like hiding coordinates in audio files and that kind of thing. And I think what it proves is that like nothing is too arcane for a really dedicated fan base of people who just love the basic fantasy, so they will find, like, in the best example of this, the most particular recent example was the last time I spoke about Elite on the podcast, which was the alien encounter, that close encounter that was the kind of thing that like brought the game alive to people, because holy shit, that's possible. But I've always been a big fan of that kind of slow burn video game storytelling, particularly in MMOs. So it's cool to see that they're doing that. It's not the sort of thing I'll ever really encounter, but every time it happens, and this is probably why it happens, I feel I need to dip back into the game, which thankfully it's not a subscription game, so I'm not like resubbing for this stuff, but dip back into the game and kind of like play a bit more and move my ship over to the area where the new stuff's happening. Just because I know that one day the big faction war is going to break out or the alien invasion is finally going to happen. And at that point I want to be able to jump back in and have a ship ready to go and stuff. So that was my reason for jumping back in. But since that time, they've done the commanders update. Like last time I played, multi-crew ships were in, so you could jump in with your friends and kind of command multiple stations in a ship. I believe. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that was the commanders update. But anyway, so this is the update that allows you to make yourself in Elite now. You have the ability to create an avatar, with a reasonable degree of, like, it's a pretty good character creator. It's a sort of, BioWare game tier character creator, and that's incorporated really nicely into the game. It's been bolted on really seamlessly. So if you, pick what color flight suit your pilot is wearing and things, and you look down in VR, they've replaced all of the character models and stuff. If you use all the external cameras that you can kind of like fly around the ship while you're doing whatever, you can see through the window and see you. And because when I signed up for Elite, I made my, in other games I would create a character, but because I desperately want to live and work in space more than anything else, I literally just like, my Elite name is just Thurston, like, cause it's always formatted as commander name, and I didn't want a handle, I just wanted it to be me. So I did the thing I would not normally do, and I just made me, because it's just me in space, and that's all I really want from Elite. And a lot of the things they've done around that have been little things I've wanted them to do for ages, and it might sound really pointless, but it makes a difference to me. You can now name your ship, which is a thing, and it's dumb that this is a premium cosmetic, but it's like £2 to get the ability to like have your name printed with various different styles of nameplate on the side of your ship. And I must have said before that these games are so much about, even though they're about doing repetitive things in space, there's so much about that specific fantasy that means a great deal to a lot of people. Like that fantasy of like, I'm going to have my own spaceship and it's going to have the name I give it, and I'm going to fly around and be Mal Reynolds or Han Solo or whoever, is enough to have crowdfunded Star Citizen to the extent that it's been crowdfunded, and it has its hooks in me just as a basic kind of thing. So I like that I have, you know, my ship, and it's a Cowboy Bebop fantasy as well, like totally thing, but that's the other thing, it fits for me. Like, and so I've been playing around, and I've refitted my, the ship I've had for a while, which is a keelback, which is technically a cargo ship. But all of the best, spaceships are cargo ships, really. Like, the best kind of spaceship is a refitted cargo ship that does something cool now. Like, you can say that for almost every, for loads of them. So, I fitted a passenger bay, which allows you to do the kind of passenger delivery missions, which are basically just cargo runs, but they have a little bit more interesting flavor text, and you feel like you're making more choices. So like, you can run refugees out of war zones, and those missions are just generated by what's happening in a sector. But it's a nice way of having it, adding some atmosphere to your deliver box from place to place, and different passengers require different quality cabins. So, I only have an economy cabin because I only tend to be running refugees places, and it's a greater capacity, so I can take more people. I did have a business class for, fancier refugees. But I swapped, but I swapped it out, so that I can have a fighter bay, which is the other thing that has been in the game for a little while. But I've gone back and forth in Elite about whether or not I fight people, whether I run, because I quite like the feeling of running and having the unarmed ship. That's the Serenity. That's specifically the Serenity fantasy. Yeah. And occasionally I go back towards Millennium Falcon, where you also have guns. And now I have guns, partly because, there isn't it is still a game about sticking a bit of music on or a podcast or something and just flying through space and then switching it off for the great sound design and then, just, pottering and making numbers get bigger. And the combat is one of the main ways in which it is a game, in addition to being a truck simulator. Not that truck simulation isn't a game, but you know what I mean? It's one of its most mechanically deep areas. And that's enhanced by the fighter bay, which is just a really cool, it's one of the ways I always hoped they'd expand the game, and it's such a cool thing. So now, I have one crewmate who is on the ship at all times. And when I'm in a combat situation and, my cargo ship has forward facing guns and can hold its own, but it's kind of big and cumbersome. And now, if I want to, I can sort of look down, or not in VR, just your character looks down and it brings up the panel that they've added to the bottom of the screen, because every UI and element in Elite is sort of in the world, and it appears when you quote unquote look at it, and like tab over to the fighter that's in the bay and assign either myself to it or my crew member. And if you assign yourself to it, then your crew member like takes the helm, which is a kind of nice thing, and then the voice of your ship becomes their voice, and they are randomly generated and have their own look and stuff. So mine is a lady called Florence, and Florence takes the helm, and they all have little randomly generated bios and things, and there's that kind of thing, and it's just enough to give it flavor. Like I'm a big fan of the value of just a little bit of text or something to make you feel like I know who Florence is. And then you fade. It's a bit like getting to the buggy when you land, but you fade to black, and then you kind of very quickly fade back in again in the cockpit of the fighter. There's no animation at present for walking from the cockpit to the fighter bay, but your imagination can fill in the gaps. And then you get kind of lowered in a, it's like a lift, basically. Like it's a lift that like the fighter's on like, trying to think what the word is for like like a forklift, but like a forklift that a vehicle parks on, like, rails on a panel that kind of like come out the bottom. It's like Thunderbird 2, all right? It's like when the pods come out of Thunderbird 2. So it kind of lowers on a lift underneath the ship, and then you get kind of like you get like sort of shot forward off the rail, and then the lift retracts back up into the ship, and you can fly separately from it. And the fighters are pretty powerful. They're very fast. They're much faster than anything else in the game. You can operate within a maximum radius of your mothership essentially, which is about 25 kilometers. It's quite away. Like you can go quite far away and come back again. And then you have a panel that allows you to give orders to your other ship, which is being controlled by the AI, which can be the fighter and it can be, your main ship. I always go out in the fighter because that's what
why wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's what the fun is. But like it is also kind of fun to launch your NPC, and also this can be done multiplayer as well. So if you invite a friend who can be anywhere in the galaxy, you don't need to be, they can just join your ship for a bit. And if it's a multi-crew ship with multiple bridge stations, then you can all share spaces on the bridge and do different jobs.
Holy shit.
But you can also deploy them in the fighter. So I want someone to jump in with me. And I will totally, Tom, if you want to jump in, I'll totally deploy you in a fighter.
Yeah, I haven't played Elite for ages, but this sounds amazing.
Yeah, it looks great.
Exactly
it's been, the game's been out for years and it's been slow to necessarily get a lot of these features, but they all look so good when they happen.
Yeah.
And they and it's just, it's a fun thing. It makes combat a little bit easier. It's kind of scary being in the fighters because they are little and, you're sat in a very small cockpit compared to what you're used to if you've played a lot of Elite normally. But like, yeah, it's just a really cool thing. And then you can sort of contact the ship again to request docking and get to watch the lift. They stop and then the lift comes down and then, it kind of projects this kind of like docking funnel outside of it. And if you get into the docking funnel at the right speed, it'll sort of pull you in and then like plug you back into the ship. And it's just a great series of clunky space animations. But that's all I really want is just the things to go like hiss and chunk, spaceship. I like it so much. I don't really have words for it. But they've done such a good job with that stuff that it like, I would say of Elite that it still feels like it's waiting for the game. And maybe that's unfair, but like, if you don't like the idea of just carting things around in space.
And that is what original Elite was.
Yeah, like it's Elite.
That is what it is.
Then, there's something sort of, then you sort of wait maybe for the other shoe to drop. You need to be able to specifically get your moments of drama from little ambient things that in sort of strict mechanical terms probably don't mean very much. Like, holy shit, I went to the system and it's a pulsar system and it looks incredible. Like these kind of vast blue suns that, have these kind of huge coronas that kind of spiral out through the star system, and maybe you can't judge the first time you see one, you can't judge how close you are to it, and you end up getting pulled out of supercruise in a kind of violent, violent exit hyperspace moment that leaves you kind of careening through space, and it doesn't really inconvenience you. You take 3% hull damage and continue on to your destination, but it means something to the experience, or your target happens to be on the night side of a planet, and you've got to do your landing at night and you switch the lights on as you come down, you see the headlamps illuminate this kind of strange craggy surface of a procedure generated alien world, and none of this stuff is necessarily changing what you're doing, which is making money for collecting missions and going places. But I don't know, it's the opposite of, it feels like we'd kind of describe like three extremes or something here. We have N, which is the game you can play for 5 minutes and do something, and it's not, in terms of objectives, it's fundamentally repetitive. In terms of inputs, it's fundamentally repetitive, but it's just that kind of rapid synapse firing kind of like thing that kind of compels you to go through it for any length of time. And then Tölva, which fits nicely into an hour, but maybe strains if it goes longer than that. And Elite, which for me is like a kind of brain screensaver of a game. Like, it's like if you left my brain on but idle for any length of time, it just flips to a picture of a spaceship, like just idly like crossing a starfield, like in those old Windows screensavers. And that's kind of what Elite is. It's an interactive version of that Windows screensaver, just vanishing into a starfield forever, happily passing hours for doing nothing, really.
It's interesting to revisit Elite in the knowledge, the light knowledge that Star Citizen is going to be hitting its 3.0, I think, update later this year, which is the update that's going to theoretically like bind together a lot of the kind of separate systems they've been building the last few years. Where this is the one that's going to let you actually do the thing of going down onto a planet and going seamlessly back up into space and into a shooter mission on a ruined spacecraft. And like you, Chris, like I adore this space fantasy specifically, and it feels like the ultimate, for me, the peak of the MMO in future would be the ultimate realization of the Serenity fantasy, where you can actually go and do missions wherever you want and engage with other, friends cooperatively in a multiplayer environment. And both Elite and Star Citizen are promising that, do you think that, where would you put your money down if you're going one way or the other?
I kind of think that so they're very different stories because, I mean, I genuinely believe that Star Citizen is going to get where it's going because they demonstrate it frequently enough. It's not got any of those hallmarks of a problem project. I mean, I imagine there are things that are difficult about making it, but it has none of those sort of like, oh, and then it vanished for 2 years and they didn't say anything. Right? They're constantly talking about it. I'm on the mailing lists for both games, and you're constantly getting new stuff for Star Citizen. And people are playing it right now at various levels of completion. Elite is obviously, I don't think the product is as big a team or as many resources, and it has the benefit of having been out and kind of been a live game for a long time. I think, I don't know, like maybe when you're super into it, there is only space in your life for one of those things, but I will happily play both of them. And I mean, if Star Citizen does everything it's promising to do, then that's probably the one you stick with because it's the one where you can have the most different experiences.
Yeah.
But I think Elite does so much so well in terms of just the drama of being in space and landing on a new world and that kind of thing that I do find it a consistently pleasant place to spend time. I think one thing I would say about Elite that's become more apparent recently is like when I started playing it, I really sought out combat, bounty hunting and things. And I like the idea of being a trader or a smuggler or a explorer who gets into scraps and maybe chooses to fight and sometimes runs and sometimes doesn't. At the moment, I think Elite has some work to do to hit that balance a little bit better in that it's actually, you get the warning sometimes that you're going to take a particular set of cargo or a particular group of passengers, and you'll have a red warning on the mission that says enemy ships may be sent against you. And it almost never happens. And I think if I was to change anything about Elite, I would just dial that thing up like 400%. Because it's always more interesting when you are doing, you've got a 2-jump mission or something, and you're on your second jump, and then you get interdicted, and you have to either escape the interdiction vector, and if you can't, you then have to fight. And I think maybe they're wary of disrupting the trader path with having to fight. But honestly, that's kind of like interrupting it with things to do. Like, I understand that, I'm one of them, people who just like to spend time and do stuff, but I feel like turning that stuff up would be really nice. And it would also mean that, like, if I have a mate who's only interested in doing the combat stuff and wants to sit in my ship waiting to go in the fighter for a couple of hours, like, if you did come and join me and we wanted to fly around and you wanted to try out the fighter and kind of do that stuff, I would have to change how I played. And that's a bit dumb, I think. Like, I would have to go, all right, we're going to go looking for some fights. We're going to go try and hunt some bounties, which is fine. That's a fun way to spend time. But the full fantasy is we're just going to form a crew and we're both going to profit from my missions. And if we get in a fight, you jump in the fighter and deploy and I'll support you. And you kind of want for the full fantasy to work, you want those fights to kind of emerge organically, and you want to get into scraps. That's what you want to happen. You don't want to be hunting people down. You want to be, oh shit, we've got the feds on us again. We need to fight or run, right? Like, and that doesn't really work in Elite at the moment. Whereas I think Star Citizen is, even in its early alpha hits you with stuff like that a little bit more frequently, or at least it does in the, because a lot of the stuff is like structured missions rather than, they're quests rather than like randomly generated tasks from a task list.
Yeah.
It tends to be like someone has planned and now we'll have a combat bit and now we'll have a delivery bit. I'd like to find the sweet spot between those two things, but I think for Elite, it's just as simple as turn up the frequency with which NPCs go, boy, I'm going to take you down and take your cargo.
Especially when you can deploy NPC fighter pilots to actually go and defend you on your behalf. It feels as though, even as a sole trader, you can just take that route if you want to alleviate that aspect of the game for yourself. But maybe for people like us, like who want that, occasional but really exciting interaction, we'd be able to actually jump into those roles independently.
Yeah. I think they might be worried about difficulty because, like, you need a ship of a certain size where you can fit a fight bay.
Oh, right, yeah.
Like, it's not something you're going to get in the first couple of hours of the game. It's something
you can balance that. You can say a ship of a certain level or a player of a certain level is going, you can adjust behind the scenes. In
fact, I know it already does that. Like, if you're in a big cargo ship full of stuff, you are more likely to get interdicted, as far as I know. It's just, it feels like all of those values are too low at the moment. Like, I've been playing a lot of Elite and it does hit you that, like, wow, it's been a long time since an NPC even scanned me. Like, they're not asked. And that's, I don't know, it's one of those things to speak.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's a nice spaceship computer game.
It's good.
We'll continue to play it.
I love that there are these competing visions for the same amazing ideal. Like, I'm like Chris, where like that is the game I really would love and could fall in love with, and that's the game Destiny is kind of occupied for me in a very different way. Like you have your ships. It's not at all about this, precisely the same fantasy, but in terms of living a space life and seeing cool space shit and experiencing that with friends, Destiny is what's done that for me.
Destiny 2 is going to PC, right?
It is.
It is, yeah.
Did we cover that before?
I think we did.
Ooh,
I think we
Probably
did.
when I was away.
We must
It
have.
will have been while you were away.
It feels like a really
It's huge.
exciting time for PC things.
It is,
like
yeah.
things that you expect to be console exclusive suddenly coming to PC.
I think that announcement happened when it was the me and Alex pod. I think me and Alex talked about it, but you guys might have not.
Yeah, I don't remember talking about it because I would talk at great length about Destiny.
Yeah.
Because it's great.
Yeah, it is great. And it's exciting news. I still don't know what platform I'll play Destiny 2 on.
That's a really interesting question, actually. Yep. It really depends what that game, how it changes, because like it's such a good pad shooter on PS4. Like Destiny 1 is the only pad shooter I've fallen in love with ever. I've enjoyed my shooters on PC mostly, but the kind of the whole like very precise, very incredibly, well tailored feel of pad shooting on Destiny is just perfect. I don't think I could.
Yeah.
I don't think I could sacrifice that. But then the game might have to sacrifice that to go onto PC, which is
a shame. I mean, both Alex and I talked about this, that like the pad element of it is a big thing. I think I suppose the other thing that hasn't gone away in my concerns is hacking.
Right.
Something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that could easily spoil it because, it's a sad fact of playing games on the PC. Not to spend our PC podcast talking about things that could go wrong, but it's just one of those things.
No, it really is that's a serious concern.
But no, it's exciting. It's been nice going back to the game and thinking about it a bit more, having that knowledge that it's coming back and it's going to be freshly relevant to our pod experience and things. And I can finally bang on about all the things I love about that game.
Yes.
I've been working on this a lore guide, Tom, that I'm doing for you for PC Gamer.
Indeed, look out for that later on this week.
Yeah,
on PCGamer.com.
May even be up by the time this pod goes up, I imagine.
Probably, or hopefully,
maybe.
given the deadline.
Yeah. Yep. Well, no, in that case, it definitely will. I don't know when you're applying to publish it. That's what they say. That. Of course, it'll be on time. But it's been nice revisiting a game whose fiction I really, really love as well. Like,
yeah, the fiction is great, and so poorly communicated. One of my favourite game fictions, and one of the most cumbersome delivery mechanisms for that lore, I would say. Which is anyway.
Are you saying that?
Yeah.
Lore printed on trading cards that can only be accessed outside of the game is not the most ideal way of delivering.
Yeah, particularly when, if you're actually interested in that lore, you have to flip over, individual cards to get paragraphs that eventually combine into a narrative.
Oh my god.
It's a testament how good it is.
I know,
I don't regret any of that.
Absolutely.
I have memories of it, but like fond memories of it. Yeah.
I did it all as well. Like I went through all those fucking cards, but my god, don't do that into your game. That's I hope, certainly something they've learned from.
I'd be perfectly okay with a website that aggregated, like actually, to be fair, what they tried to do is brilliant, which is like, if for example, the Mass Effect Codex was always available to you either via an app or on like a website that you logged into with your profile account.
You could browse
so
it.
That, you're not, you finish up with Mass Effect at home, you go to work, but then on your lunch break, you can read through the Codex entries you haven't had time to read yet. That is a brilliant idea for any game with the Codex. Any game that would benefit from having you do the reading when you're not playing.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me do it when I'm on the loo. Let me do it when I'm, on the way to work or whatever it is. However, actually, Phantom Pain did this because Phantom Pain had the app that let you download the audio logs to your app and then listen to them like podcasts, which again is a brilliant idea.
Fantastic idea, isn't it?
Like
Destiny would benefit enormously.
That's how you do audio logs and codex entries right. Like have them be detachable from the game because people who are with a, keyboard and mouse in hand waiting to play a game probably don't want to stop and read. Like I do, but like that's because I secretly miss books and can't remember where they went. This is a brilliant idea. It's just that Destiny made that the only way of accessing that stuff, which is dumb. It's really dumb. However, I did enjoy the experience of reading all that stuff wherever I was, which was the flip side of it.
There's going to be an amazing post-mortem Destiny 1 eventually.
Yeah.
Because, my God, that game has gone through some stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, there already was an interesting making of on Kotaku, which demonstrates some of the really interesting things that go.
Illustrate, especially the engine problems, particularly because regards to the construction of levels, which is the thing I always felt when I was playing it, where there were just obvious exploits that didn't get fixed for ages, just with the geometry of the game. And it turns out that apparently, like, it's just the engine, the tools they had were incredibly cumbersome and difficult to work with.
Yeah, it said that, like, in order to, like, move a rock on a level, there was, like, a 72-hour, like, compiling process to decompile and recompile the level to move a rock.
Apparently, according to that article. But yeah, it sounds, based on, having experienced that game for its entire lifetime, it sounds completely plausible.
Yeah.
Based on the stuff
we've got a new environment. Did you make the other one blue? Yes.
I mean, I love that game, but very interesting problems as well.
Yeah, that's going to be, it's an exciting end of the year, I assume. Do they have an announced release date for it? Yeah, have they?
September is the rumour, based on some posters.
Oh yeah, of course. And also the fact that when almost, like, Destiny's always had a big September
release. And it's also
release.
when it, according to any AAA release, it will come out.
Yeah, well, I mean, Destiny 1 came out in September, the first big expansion came out in September, and the second big expansion came out in September.
Yeah.
So, I'm just gonna
throw it out there.
Poirot the shit out of this one.
Yeah, very exciting.
Awesome.
Shall we do questions?
What? Where did you come from?
The other room. I've been here all along.
Now I remember that happening minutes ago.
It's almost as if there hasn't been a 20 to 30 minute break in which Pip appeared. Hi, Pip.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine.
How's the pog been going?
All right. Any consensus there, Toms?
Nothing on fire?
It's certainly all right, but we needed a keeper of grudges for this particular section. And
I
we needed
am here.
Also an answerer of questions, because I'm not sure we're equipped at this stage of the evening.
Oh, has it been? How far down the whiskey bottle are you?
All the way.
There wasn't much when I was pouring myself a bit.
It's gone now. But our first question comes from Alex, who writes, "It's World Penguin Day."
I know, exciting. Sorry, I mean, it won't be by the time people listen to this. It'll still be exciting. It won't be Penguin Day.
The residual excitement will last till Friday.
Yeah. Sorry.
What's your favourite penguin in video games? Failing that, best tuxedo. Alex.
I like that he predicts the failure of his question. I'm going to assume
I like the old double question gambit.
I do have a favourite video game penguin, and it's the Mecha Penguin from Little Big Adventure, which is a wind-up explosive penguin. You wound it up, and then it waddled along, and it would blow up and destroy your enemies.
Good.
Good penguin all round.
Nice.
All the key penguin qualities it had. Moving forwards, exploding.
I liked, I've been tinkering a bit in David O'Reilly's game Everything, and Graham did the review for RPS, and as part of it he put some screenshots up, and he'd made a penguin the size of a landmass, and so it's just this enormous thing that's like its head is peeking out over the top of the sea. It's just sort of glaring.
David O'Reilly's game concepts sound like you asked a 3-year-old what kind of games they want to make, and there's
everything.
Like, mountain. Everything.
But yeah, I want to get to the point where I can spawn a giant penguin that will destroy us all.
Sounds good.
Everyone aspires to have a family one day, Pip.
What? That's the opposite of a family.
No, let's not go on to that.
Oh my god.
A penguin that will destroy us all.
They're definitely different. I'll give you that.
Thank you. That's as
Oh, we
close
finally
as we'll get.
found out what it means when Pip says opposite. It means different. I think my favourite penguin would be, well, I've really enjoyed all of the protests that have taken place in Club Penguin. There was an anti-Trump protest in Club Penguin. That
doesn't exist anymore, though.
Club Penguin.
Folded.
It still exists in time.
What? Yeah, but I mean, it's Penguin Resort now, isn't it? Or Island Club Resort, or Club Penguin House, or something. You know, like, and it's mobile only.
But I mean, I was describing something that occurred in the past, and that can't be taken away from me, Pip. Not by you, not by anybody.
But
Also,
you said that they occur in Club Penguin. They can't now.
I suppose so.
Sorry.
Wasn't it also featured in the film Three Lions?
The Club Penguin?
Yeah.
It's impossible because apparently it doesn't exist.
And therefore it's never existed. That's how time works. It's gone now and it was forever gone.
It's actually a Destiny plot point. Yeah, unfortunately, Club Penguin was removed from history, and therefore we can't mention it. And in doing so, I've condemned this particular episode of the podcast to Timeline B.
The Star Trek time police will show up.
Exactly.
Erase this
It's
podcast.
not in prime continuity anymore. But nonetheless, that's my preferred. I like my penguins woke. Tom?
I think that games are underserved by penguins. I think we need more penguins.
Yeah.
That was a very politician answer. That was a complete,
We can and we
that
must
was
do
a-
better.
That was a complete question time. I didn't prepare this question. So,
It's not in my clipboard. I don't know what to say. So.
Binders full of penguins.
all I can say is that, the honourable member on the opposite side of the aisle has clearly not provided the British people with the level of penguin that they believe is appropriate, higher or lower than what we're talking about.
I say penguins have always existed and they will exist and they will continue to exist, and that is a positive thing for the British people.
Wow, we're good at this.
Yeah. Oh, we should totally do question time from question time. Next up on question time from question time, it's Carlos who writes, DayZ is still in early access. How is that even acceptable? It's been more than 3 years since it became available. What to do, if anything?
Well, the clue's there. I would say nothing. But I was slightly, mildly annoyed. The Long Dark was like a midweek madness sale on Steam, 50% off. And I was like, oh, is it finally out? No, it's not finally out. It's still in early access. They're doing a half off sale and it hasn't even been released yet.
Madness.
It is madness. Only they'd given me a clue in the title of the sale.
Infuriating Wednesdays on Steam.
Baffling Bi-Weekly.
Yeah. Oh, come on Thursdays.
Actually, Baffling Bi-Weekly would be great because also no one knows what Bi-Weekly means.
Yeah. Fuck this fortnightly.
DayZ is certainly a beacon of disappointment, I think, for the entire early access project, though, I would say. It's the defining letdown of that entire phenomenon.
I mean, wasn't it good for a long time? Is it still good?
It was novel for a while.
I think it was genuinely good.
It was
Most
genuinely
people had a load of
interesting.
It was good, but
experiences
limited.
with it.
Yeah.
But it was also like it was like a mess when people were finding it exciting at the time.
Yeah.
So zombies were still walking through walls and weren't really a concern, but they'd stumbled upon like a use for the armor template that actually had a wider appeal. And for a while, the novelty of that sustained it, but the game did not improve significantly as far as I could tell from that point very much.
And I suppose, like, when it was a mod, the fact that it was a mess was acceptable, and then when you paid your money, because it was an early access, the fact that it was a mess was sort of a temporary condition. You were thinking, like, oh, I pay my money, I'm going to get the polished
You'd
version
reasonably
eventually.
assume that, yes.
Yeah.
But that is not the case. So, yeah, DayZ is a good thing to highlight as a reason, as a warning sign if you're going to invest in any early access game.
I do think that it's that thing of you should only put your money down if you don't mind if the game doesn't go any further. Like that's,
Yeah, definitely.
and with Kickstarter I wouldn't, or any crowdfunding, I, again, don't put money in unless you're happy to never see a return on that investment. Like if you can't afford to lose that money or you're going to be devastated if it doesn't go well, then, that's a gamble I wouldn't take.
Quite wise. Andrew writes, I'm going to skip a little bit ahead through this question because it's quite long, but Andrew is getting ready to go to university and has decided not to take his gaming PC with him, but he has a modest laptop with an i5 that's not particularly able to handle 3D graphics. And his question is, what games would he recommend that would be suitable to play on such a device? He's gravitated towards well-known indie games so far, But he's particularly looking for long games or games with lasting replayability, as he won't be buying any games during his time at university, as, in his words, I will have no money. So, and so far, he lists as the games that he has planned The Consuming Shadow, Darkest Dungeon, Metal Slug 1, 3, and X, Gunpoint, Hatfall, Democracy 3, Limbo, Nidhogg, Binding of Isaac, Undertale. And that's from Andrew.
I want to recommend Concrete Jungle, which is a game I talked about on this pod before, and so was Graham way back in the day. But that is a game that looks gorgeous, but it isn't actually 3D graphics. It's, a bunch of sprites, and so it runs really well on my MacBook Air, which also has integrated graphics. And I think an i5, it sounds like similar spec to laptop he's running. And that game just has fucking endless depth to it. It's got this enormously long single-player campaign with all these unlockable characters and abilities, all these skill trees, this versus mode that you can play in single-player against AI that has all these tiers to it, and there's just so much to it.
I think one of the things that, one of the things that makes this hard to answer is knowing the screen size of his laptop, because resolution, I remember, because I was at uni with a rubbish laptop, that's why I played so much N, which is a game I would still recommend, actually. But the resolution you can run games at is an issue. That notwithstanding, I definitely put Invisible Ink in this category.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And FTL, it seems like an obvious one, but banged on about it. And there's a game called Spelunky that, we've not mentioned before, but yeah, would probably fit here as well. There's loads, like, you sort of, this is when I went to university 10 years ago, and I had to make do with the dawn of the indie revolution with games like N, and I can't remember what else there really was that would run on a shitty old laptop. Like, now seems like an amazing time that you could go to uni and play nothing but great indie strategy games forever, RPGs and things. There's loads.
And nonetheless, if you have a low-ish resolution screen, there are loads of games that really suffer from trying to run them from high-res screens, including especially Diablo 2, which is still sold by Blizzard on Battle.net. And I bought it, actually, like, a few months ago.
Tom, why?
I bought Diablo 2 again, digitally.
I heard Jeff Kaplan saying he's bought Overwatch 3 times. Like, paid for a retail copy of Overwatch 3 times.
I just kind of wanted to see what it was like, and it's a disaster on modern systems. Because the resolution is just kind of converted 1-to-1, so everything is fucking tiny on.
Oh wait, so do you see more of the game world?
Yeah.
Huh.
I think so.
Well, Gunpoint also has that problem. So, hopefully on your relatively small laptop screen, you'll be fine. If you have some kind of like retina bullshit where it's like secretly 4,500 pixels wide, then it'll be terrible. Sorry.
Tom is sorry for your bullshit.
There's also, I've forgotten literally everything I was going to say, but...
What about a game on the laptop?
Oh, no, it was something that you can play a lot of. Devil Daggers? Would that work?
Oh,
yeah, that probably would work, actually.
That is 3D, right? But
it is 3D, but it's lo-fi.
The other thing that I was going to say is that, with the caveat that Andrew and I appear to have entirely different tastes, to the point where I don't think I get on very well with most of the things he mentioned or don't own them. I would thoroughly recommend keeping an eye on Itch.io, the store, because a lot of the stuff on there is interesting, sort of small scale projects that you often have the option of getting free of charge, or maybe $1, or something like that, and there can just be some really fascinating stuff in there, or like the building blocks for a thing that is interesting, or little projects to pass the time. And I think people, it seems to be the sort of store that is growing in profile, but it's still the sort of thing where it's a very particular community that is really familiar with it, or that trawls it regularly, because it's a bit of a pain to find super cool stuff. You maybe would have to put in a bit more effort, but yeah, I would thoroughly recommend that for
surely that's where excellent itchier recommendations on rockpapershotgun.com come in, isn't it, Pip?
Because Alice and I will happily, happily sit there playing things from that.
I think, thinking about it further, other games in this category, I would recommend Factorio if you're interested in management games at all. That's a factory building game that is also pretty lo-fi.
I ran Dota on my cardboard laptop.
You did?
And that's a game that can eat into your,
Yeah,
into
that
your
can
life
destroy your
like
entire life.
nothing
Don't play that at
else.
university. So this is an element of actually, like, even though you want games that are kind of replayable over a long period of time, like, I would definitely recommend short form things like N++, actually, because you can play them in 5-minute bursts. And, you know, it's a magical 3 years of your life. You want to be spending it.
In Animal Crossing, like I
Yes,
did.
or Stardew Valley might be another one that would be a good choice for this. It depends on how you want to divide your time at university, really.
Glad to know. Also, because I use a MacBook Air for development a lot, I kind of have to optimize heat signature for that kind of laptop. So when that's done, it should run on his laptop fine.
Well, if we're going there, Tom, why not buy HackMud?
Why not? I think you
You
should.
could play my Nature Twine game as well.
Indeed.
That will run.
They all work on your laptop.
And yours at home.
Our next question, well, actually, it's more of a response to a question from last week. It comes from Diffractor, who's also Peter, but asked us to use Diffractor because someone else wrote in whose name was Peter, and this is now confusing. So he's going to
Peter
go away.
pile up.
A Peter pile up. Mm-hmm. Indeed.
That's all. That's all I had.
Bant received. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Adding to last week's discussion of games taking you out of reality, this is referring to the question last week about the person who's sort of grieving and wanted to know about games that are good at, helping you take your mind off bad situations. Adding to last week's discussion of games taking you out of reality, I feel this is a little appreciated part of why MMOs are enjoyed, particularly World of Warcraft. I play that a lot now, often because games I know I would enjoy more take too much mental effort to sustain, and more relaxed games don't feel satisfying. WoW mimics the feeling of being productive without the same stresses of being productive in reality, and it helped me feel useful while also numbing the heavy depression that I had. On the flip side, I've invested so much in it that it becomes hard to break out of those patterns when I know that I want to devote my time elsewhere. The better I've felt, the less I've wanted to Warcraft, but I don't want to fall behind on it. Though that's no fault of the game so much as it's a fault of human impulse, and realizing that has made me a better person. I'm more able to accept missing out on things. So this leads on to a question. I can feel WoW change as it tries to provide a reward without players ruining their experience getting it. What game systems have you seen or even thought of that sounded good but that resulted in players choosing to have a miserable time? Regards, Diffractor. So I know we wanted to read that out mostly because it's a nice response to something, like a personal journey with these types of games. I think I mentioned MMOs in the context of the discussion last time for their social benefit, but I think that sense of sort of, it's a little bit what I was saying about Elite earlier, that middle level of engagement where you're getting stuff done and you feel useful, but it's not neither totally stressful nor totally passive is an important sweet spot for a game to occupy.
Since he mentions both like systems we've seen and also systems we've thought of, I guess I can mention like things I've rejected for my own games.
Sure, yeah.
So in Heat Signature, it's a persistent galaxy, but your characters have permadeath. Like when you die, that character is dead forever. And a logical thing to do would be like when you start the next character, you go and find your previous character's body and get all their stuff back. But if I let you do that, the start of every life now is just going to be trekking out to wherever you happen to die. It's going to be a kind of chore to get there. And then when you do get there, you're going to pick up all that guy's equipment. And if it's really good, you're just going to have the same experience that character had. Like it's just going to make your individual playthroughs more similar to each other rather than more different. And it's one of those things that sounds good in theory, but actually if you make it, it just ends up making the game worse.
Yeah. I think of this whenever I think of, to be honest, despite them being some of my favorite games, I think BioWare have often struggled with this, which is locking a narrative payoff behind a kind of grindy thing that can be min-maxed. It's just a really flawed way of constructing a narrative game that encourages people to play in a way that is actually detrimental to their experience in order to get the thing that's important to them, which is a positive narrative payoff. So the moment, like, you can ruin Mass Effect 1 for someone by saying there's a really funny payoff if you get, I'm sorry, I'm doing this right now. There's a really funny payoff if you get all of the bizarrely hidden galaxy map collectibles in Mass Effect 1. There's a funny payoff in Mass Effect 3. And as soon as you know that, a certain streak of player is going to be set to do all that stuff, even though it's literally just dragging your cursor around that asteroid belt until something pings. Mm. And that's just, you don't need it. You don't need the padding. You might as well just deliver the fun thing without needing the, needing to reward grindy, boring stuff. Pip?
Hi.
What did you spill?
Nothing.
Is that a lie?
No. Anyway, so there's... Help.
What happened?
What fell in your mug?
No, it's fine.
Oh no. Oh, okay. I've guessed.
I can try and drink around it.
Pip has dropped a Star Wars role-playing game skill check dice
Oh, thank you.
into her whiskey.
I was just playing with it in my hand so that I didn't get distracted.
Yeah, that works.
Shut up.
I'm gonna...
Can I have my whiskey?
Yes, you absolutely can. Can I have my dice? Thank you.
Okay.
It's clean now, actually. Alcohol was very good cleaner.
That was a fair swap. Anyway, so what I was going to say was if you're interested in systems that end up sort of not quite working how people expected...
Try playing with the dice whilst drinking
Live with Pip.
It's interesting to watch the patches that happen in MOBAs a little bit after a big change, because usually that's the developers responding to the ways that players are exploiting it that they didn't expect or that didn't come out when they were testing it on the beta servers with a smaller audience.
The hotfixes.
Yeah, or just the fact that, there's this particular interaction that this one person found and it went around the internet and it's now, the only thing that anyone does, because in a game where you're essentially trying to get every advantage you can over someone, it doesn't make sense not to exploit everything that you can possibly do. So, yeah, I would say if that's just a thing that you're curious about, League does a set of massive changes every year after Worlds in the pre-season, and also smaller sort of ones in lulls throughout the year. So it's worth keeping an eye on their blogs and on the forums and things for just oddities that that stem from that.
Cool.
Saved that.
You did. I think this dice will be fine.
Give it a roll, Chris. What number comes out?
What number comes out is it's a triumph symbol and a success symbol.
So that's fine.
There you go.
It's absolutely fine.
I mean, admittedly, this dice can only roll success and blanks. So, and there is only one blank face on it.
There's a skull on it, isn't there?
No.
What's that then? That.
It's a winged Jedi symbol.
Right, we're not getting into this.
Does that mean success?
Yes.
Oh, God.
It means technically it means advantage, technically. You don't want me to get into the mechanisms of Star Wars role-playing.
Well, can't the Jedis just, change the dice to whatever they wanted anyway?
They're not real. But that literally is a plot point in The Phantom Menace. Thank you for reminding me.
Well, anyway, can we do a different question and move away from the incident?
I don't know why I sat you next to... Oh, my God. Are all of those models fallen? Oh, for God's sake, Pip.
They're sleeping.
There's a lot of TIE fighters lying down on my shelf now. Are those the dice from the dice tray?
No.
Let's try.
There's a blue horror surfing on a ship as well. I'm really pleased about that one.
You've only been in the room for half an hour.
What a half an hour it was. Anyway,
the next question comes from Dan, aka the Spear Tip, who writes, Dear something, that I'm not going to be able to pronounce, so I'm not going to try. And honestly, screw you for trying to get me to say that. Have you ever listened to the soundtrack for a game before playing/seeing any of said game, thus forever ruining it for you? I shall explain, semicolon. Incidentally, if you put a semicolon in your questions, I will always read it out like that. I stumbled onto the soundtrack for Crypt of the Necrodancer around the time of the game's release and found it great for helping me power through mindless tasks in work with my headphones on. Since then, though, I've been unable to bring myself to play the game even once because I'm so used to hearing the music out of context that hearing it in context would just be weird. I could just turn the music off, I suppose, but where's the point in that? Cheers, you lot have kept me company on many a 100-mile-a-day work commute over the years. Dan.
Wow.
Jesus.
It's a long commute.
Yeah.
The Crypt of the Necrodancer problem is one that you could solve by, there's a function where you can substitute the game's music for your own, and you lose a bit with that just in terms of, you don't get the shopkeeper singing when you go to the shop. But it's, you still, it doesn't get in the way of using the rhythm side of things because the game sort of adapts, if I remember rightly. And I know all of this because I substituted the song, well, all of the music in the entire game for the village peoples in the Navy, and forget about that. And then every time I boot the game up, it happens, and then I remember, and I enjoy it for a time, and then I remember that perhaps one can have slightly too much in the Navy, and
as the saying goes,
and then have to leave for a time.
I haven't gone back to Metal Gear Solid 5, but you've reminded me that when I do, I'm going to be pleasantly surprised to find that when the rescue helicopter comes in, it's going to be playing Too Many Zoos. Crazy panic jazz.
I actually do get where this question is coming from, because I tend to avoid over-listening to soundtracks for anything, because I feel like I hate the feeling of watching a film or playing a game and knowing what track it is from the soundtrack, at least until a film or a game has reached such a point of saturation with me that I can do that.
What I've always found weird is when there's a song that's really popular and it's like, oh, it's the theme from this film, and it only plays for 30 seconds at the very end of the credits, and you're just like, really? It's the credit music, not the theme. Like, that's not it. For me, that feels so weirdly disingenuous. This is not a grudge that should be part of a gaming podcast, I realise, though. So,
speaking of that, I do play Heat Signature with the music off always, even though I really love the music, because I know if I listen to the music every time I play it, I'll be fucking sick of the music by the time the game comes out. Because music, you just can kind of, wear on you more than other things, I think. And so every time I show it to like press or something, or I've made like a build that I'm going to show to someone else, obviously I turn the music back on so they can hear it, and then I hear it and I'm like, holy shit, this game has great music.
That's awesome.
Next question comes from Juice. And if there were ever a Tom Senior and Chris question, it's this one.
Who am I?
Dear Thing and Other Thing, I also appreciate the amount of effort you've put in to that lead. I recently got back into the whole Warhammer tabletop gaming thing, in no small part due to you guys talking about it in the special podcasts. I never found the old Warhammer fantasy world particularly compelling, and I'm quite enjoying Age of Sigmar's slightly more unusual fantasy setting. The PC games all seem to be stuck in the old world, though, both the stuff that's already out, like Total Warhammer, and Left for Skaven, he means Vermintide, but I totally get what he means, and the in-development but not yet released stuff that I have seen. Are there any plans for a PC game set in AOS that you're aware of? What kind of game would you like to see if they do announce such a thing? Mr. Juice. Tom?
Well, I would not expect an Age of Sigmar game anytime soon. And by that I mean like within a decade.
Really?
Yeah, because I think that the old world is kind of old property to Games Workshop, and that's kind of, they can make money with it through games, which is an interesting time for old world Warhammer. But I think as far as the new setting goes, they're going to be so keen to keep control of it and to manage it and to make sure that they're in control of it, that I can't see them giving the license to anyone for a long time.
Yeah, that's probably true. But money.
But they're making money from miniatures, and they're then they're not a games publishing. They're not a games manufacturer at all. Like they want to make miniatures, and they want people to buy their miniatures and buy into their games. And I think that they would genuinely dilute the AOS setting if they gave it to a studio that did a bad job of it. And I don't think they will risk doing that for years.
We're going to offer the flip side to this, which is that AOS as it currently stands, the thing that distinguishes it from traditional Warhammer is that it's not very heavy at the moment. It's a very light setting compared to the old world, which is what we're talking about, which is the kind of Renaissance fantasy, very sort of rich, kind of very specific setting that makes for a perfect setting for a strategy game like Total War Warhammer, but is all about kind of quite granular kind of places and locations and characters and things. Age of Sigmar, because it's in its formative stages, is very much about like big iconic characters and big iconic character archetypes and everything being sort of larger than life and very vividly drawn, but kind of detached from a sense of sort of material reality. They're going in that direction with the fiction, but they're getting there slowly. And therefore, I'm going to slam down my Star Wars dice and say it is very fertile ground for a MOBA.
Oh.
Sorry.
It really is. If Games Workshop were ever going to... they already did, didn't they? There's like a 40k MOBA in the works, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Why would
cool,
that
but
not
some weird
fall under
fucking
the
thing.
same, approach as what Tom said? Like, does the world need another MOBA? And if it is going to be a solid 6 out of 10 game, what's the point of adding it?
The struggles of launching it. Well, okay, maybe I don't mean like, you know, a MOBA in the most generic possible sense. What I mean is the thing that distinguishes Age of Sigmar within that family of tabletop games is that it is notably more kind of hero focused. That's probably one of the things that will continue to distinguish it, I suspect, as a new edition of 40k comes along, is that it will continue to be the game that has like the individual big powerful characters. I think there is something in if not a by the numbers MOBA, but like something in a character action game, a Diablo game, that kind of thing that could easily be built around that fluid setting that wouldn't necessarily work in other Warhammer contexts. I'd play that.
Something I'm going to chip in. I know. So,
you challenge your approaches.
As somebody who has seen the cover of many an episode of White Dwarf...
Issue?
Shush now.
What is it? What is a
Stop
magazine?
helping. I feel qualified to offer an opinion, and it is that the people at Games Workshop seem to really like involving the fan community and, you know, heroing the projects that people who love their games do. And so I would think it would be a better fit for them if they did some things like running game jams, like community projects that are just sort of, you can tool around with the setting, just do not sell this and we'd like to publish the results of it on our website, you know, or, you know, point people towards things that people are doing that are really interesting in the same way that they highlight paint jobs that people have done that are fantastic, or, you know, stories that people have written. I think that feels like that would be a better fit for who they are as a company and how they propagate their community.
Yeah. That'd be an interesting approach for them to take.
Would be. I just can't see them ever doing, like, they're still very, very protective of their lore, particularly or IP, as you might say. Like, especially if they're crafting this new thing, and I'm not entirely sure that Games Workshop entirely knows what AOS is yet still as a universe. It still hasn't been fleshed out to the extent that it's a 40k or, you know, Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah, it doesn't have a central kind of philosophical conflict.
It's in a vulnerable stage I think, as like a lore would, as lore progresses.
It's not fully fledged.
No. And so in that context,
Which is weird for something with so many feathers in it.
yeah, right. So in that context, why would you ever give that to people outside of the company ever? Like, you'd never trust anyone else to like realize it for you. That's your job to do as a company. And I think Games Workshop's still in the process of putting that together.
But
and it's going to be years before it happens.
I think that's what I'm getting at with the community side of things, because I think that wouldn't be a case of, letting people run riot with your property in the same way as farming out a license might be. I think that might be an interesting exercise in seeing what a community actually does, in terms of how they play with it, how they engage with it, what they find interesting, and maybe digging into the stories that your fans are actually telling when they play these things. I think that might just be interesting.
Yeah, it could be like as much as anything, like a really great intelligence gathering.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right, actually, Pip, because one of the interesting things about AOS, and without drifting too far into the territory of the other podcast, but it is currently the Warhammer setting where you can exercise the most creativity as a player and still have something that fits within the world. The old world was limiting because it had defined boundaries. 40k is limiting because it has defined boundaries. AOS kind of doesn't. One of the armies, the miniatures armies that I think won best army at the huge Age of Sigmar event that took place over the last weekend was a Cthulhu themed Nurgle force that looked amazing, but it was entirely the creation of its player, and applying some of that, and that can fit within that setting because the setting is still so young. Applying some of that logic to a game would be a really interesting direction that they could take. Totally. It's just, I also agree with Tom that it doesn't feel like Games Workshop to do that.
Yeah, it's like Pip's idea is a really good idea, but I think given what that company has done in the past, there's no way that would happen.
And the reason I say that like a character-focused game like a MOBA or even a fighting game or a Diablo-style game would work is because the parts of that fiction that are quite well defined are the heroes and the character classes. So if I said to you, Tom, imagine playing a dungeon crawler where you could be a Lord Celestin or a Relictor or a Castellan, you probably have an intuitive sense of how each of those things would play differently, which is probably the sort of thing that they could leverage most successfully for a video game right now. But it's interesting because it's a genuinely new fantasy setting that hasn't had digital expression yet. And it'll be interesting to see what direction that takes when it happens for the first time, even if that is 10 years from now. Yeah,
and I think the reason why I'm so skeptical about it is that the existing universes still haven't been leveraged terribly well. So 40k is an amazing setting for an action RPG, and there are people making one right now. I can't remember what it's fucking called, but it's not good as far as I've played so far. Like, it's really sluggish, and it's about like one person versus groups of 4 people, and there's destructible cover and stuff. But the fantasy is like, if you're a Space Marine captain or something, like one of the ultimate warriors in this world, you should be taking on hundreds of things. The action RPG is a perfect vehicle for that, and we still have not seen an amazing action RPG 40k game. That's a perfect vehicle. So I really feel like, maybe with the occasional exception like Vermintide, these licenses are not being picked up by people who necessarily know what's going to work with fantasy.
With that settled, we move on to Grudges, from one Warhammer-derived thing to a different Warhammer-derived thing. Our first Twitter grudge, therefore it's very brief. It comes from Alex, but not the same Alex as earlier. I know this because when I wrote the questions down, I wrote different Alex. Different Alex's grudge is as follows. Games that make you manually quit and relaunch when you want to apply graphics options changes.
Yeah.
Is this not a technical necessity?
I think that if it's a game where you have to, where it takes a long or a significant amount of time to go in and reboot and make changes, and then if that's not quite right, or if you need to change them back and you have to go back out and back in again, I do think that there should be a way of maybe accessing that screen earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe seeing a test,
Everyone's Gone to the Rapture. Had a fucking minute and a half long intro that you have to sit through. You can't skip it in any way. And only after that's finished do you get to see how the game runs. And if you change any graphics options, you have to quit the entire game and start again. It doesn't save. So you have to watch the minute and a half intro again. And it ran like a dog on my machine, which runs everything else perfectly. And it just was an absolute nightmare. And every time I wanted to test the different graphic settings, I had to sit through a minute and a half intro all over again. And by that point, I just hated the game so much that I was never going to play it. It was just, it literally destroyed the game.
If you didn't have the patience for that, I'd have the patience for the rest of the game.
That's the game that I was going to mention specifically, actually, because that experience of having to go out and back in again stuck with me. But for anything that my PC maybe struggles to load, or where, you know, it has to run through a certain amount of stuff, I'd prefer it if it had some way of knowing that you had made changes, presenting you with, you know, maybe a sample scene, obviously, that uses the tech in the same way, and then you get like 10 seconds to say, or 30 seconds to say, oh, that works, or no, actually I need to try something different, because it is a problem that comes up, and I think that people need to make allowances for that. Otherwise you do end up in situations where it just becomes such a palaver that you either run the game on suboptimal settings just to stop having to go through it, or, you know, you end up just feeling not very well disposed towards it for a while. Yeah,
and any, like, unskippable logos on startup which get added to this time as well, which is just horrible. Like, I understand that there are sometimes contractual obligations that mean that they have to have those logos, but I'm pretty sure those obligations don't apply to when the user changes their graphic settings. We have to show those logos again, right? So you could have some special case where if the user's just changing graphical settings and the reason we're restarting is because of that, you click this button and the game just takes care of it for you. And it's like, okay, we'll skip all that legal bullshit and get you as quickly as possible back to this menu and let you see the effects of that.
Yeah, so I certainly think that, like, I will accept I think we should accept the grudge, because I think there are many ways that games could make that process easier and people kind of don't. And I don't know whether that's because when people are testing, they know the machine that they're testing it for and what settings to, you know, like they've been working on the game so long that they kind of know. And so they just sort of don't have to deal with those things, or they're working on a really high-end PC because whatever. So yeah, like I think that it makes sense to take it because it's really annoying.
It's in the book. Our final grudge comes from Joseph. What manner of grudge voice do we want for this grudge? I didn't plan one.
I think the community quite likes it when you do your sultry voice, but as long as it's not whispering, because otherwise I'm just not listening.
I'll try and do... I'm sorry that I did a whispery
Otherwise you'll just have to summarise.
I don't know how to... I mean, this is maybe says too much. I don't know how to do a sultry voice without whispering, really.
Oh, God. Well, in that case, just do your announcer voice. Do it as if you're a town... Oh, no, that'll be loud.
That will be loud.
I don't know. Pick an adjective out of a hat.
Out of a hat?
Well, you know, just pick an adjective out of a hat.
What about, like, someone who's really excited about their grudge?
A really chipper, upbeat grudge.
Upbeat grudge.
All right. And Joseph writes, Dear Grudge Keepers.
Oh, God, I regret this.
It was the correct decision, Tommy. Excellent advice, I think.
At least 20 years ago, when I was a child and recently moved to a new country, I turned more than I'd ever had before to computer games. I can see from
really violently as you say this as well. You're sort of...
It's why excitement is one of the emotions I very rarely express.
I can see how long this paragraph is, and Chris might die. If he keeps this up to the end. Spare the man.
However, living in a wildly rural place, there weren't many places to get games from. So occasionally, I would get to go to the local big town, basically a small market town, and look at the mostly second-hand and remaindered games in the computer shop. This didn't stop me from getting occasional good games. I had X-Wing and SWAT 3.
I've never seen you move so much when you're reading.
It's the air quotes.
There's a lot of shoulder wiggle as well.
I'm missing the air quotes. Yeah, anyway.
Which are still beloved games. However, the game that had excited and disappointed me most, which I still hold a bitter seed in my heart over, was Sim Life. I'd played SimCity and SimAnt back in my previous school, so the idea of Sim Life, a game that did for all of life and evolution, was really amazing. But of course, this couldn't really work. And it literally did not work. Of the 4 discs required to install it, only the first 2 worked. While the third one would always fail. This was because of hardware conflict. That couldn't be resolved. Apparently, Sim Life wasn't that good, but I'm still disappointed. Grudges from Grudges. Joseph.
Fantastic.
That's the most I've ever moved on this podcast.
But he sounded so happy.
Indeed. How could it possibly be a grudge? I don't know why I've decided that I can't do another... I don't know why, A, I have to do grudges in a silly voice, or B, why they have to be different every time, but... Fuck it. Marsh once mispronounced "thanks for listening, everybody" in episode 1, and now we've been doing that for more than 3 years. I remember this era of bargain bins, and I remember Sim Life being in basically with SimAnt, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
In every bargain bin of that era. So, I definitely resonate with this.
I love that how this letter leads into like, obviously such a lofty idea, it couldn't possibly work. And also, literally didn't work. 2 of the discs just didn't work.
Hey, I really thought this was going to go in a direction where it was more about, like, you know, the fact that this game was a precursor to Spore, which also sort of didn't work. And, you know, this, again, one of those gaming lofty ideals that is really hard to, right?
Sorry, yes.
A noise from Tom.
Excuse me. Wow.
Wow, indeed. Oh, God. Oh, Pip, does it go in the Book of Grudges?
Okay, so I do want to know one thing, which is why not take it back and get a replacement?
From a bargain bin?
Oh, was it in a bargain bin?
Might not have been clear from how excited I was about the entire thing.
Okay, fine. Oh, if it was from a bargain bin, then that's a grudge. I mean, it should have worked. Yeah. That's basic consumer rights, that is.
It feels like a grudge from 20 years ago, doesn't it? Like,
I think
it literally is.
I also,
There's nothing wrong with that, but...
points for nursing it that long. That is a grudge.
That's a Pip grade
clearly...
Yeah, well done for not letting it go or getting on with your life.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this person probably has a life. It's just that this...
Oh,
gracious.
No, but, it's... I'm refuting Tom's awful
Yeah, it's funny how you
allegation.
sticking up for him almost sounded worse than my disparaging him.
But what I'm saying is I think that, it takes guts to have the courage of your convictions that you've been wronged. And that, that's the hallmark of a good grudge. You have been wronged.
excellent.
Well, it might make the questioner feel better to know that Spore was really, really hard to make, and that a lot of those people, really went through a lot to try and make that same vision come true, and still failed by many people's standards. I actually really like Spore, but most people don't.
I love bargain buckets.
I love buckets, interjects Tom.
But I felt before the pod, which is imminently about to end, imminently about to, obviously, we say imminently, it's about to. But yeah, the bargain buckets are the source of some of my favourite games. I discovered Shin Megami Tensei series from bargain buckets, the early ones, which were incredibly bizarre and very grindy Japanese RPGs for PlayStation 2, which has now become the Persona 5 series. Persona 5.
Oh, right.
See, I really loved the 3 for a tenner games that you could get in-game in a similar bargain vein. So that's where I got the Murder, She Wrote video game and, you know, other point and clicks. And I think that's where I picked up Bejeweled as well. It was in that same, you know.
Man, you could get 3 games for a tenner there and then get 3 bottles of wine for a tenner at the co-op. And you would be set for like...
That's a weekend.
Yeah, a weekend.
Well, I mean, you could get, what?
That's not the period of time, Tom.
Yeah, of course, a weekend. That's what I was thinking.
45 minutes.
You could also get, like, some Lambrini from Spa for, like, £2, and that comes in a really big bottle.
Okay, so you get 5 of those for the tenner.
Yeah,
Look,
yeah.
all right, we all
you're
remember the
booze by
noughties.
Yeah.
What percentage is Lambrini?
Well, it's perry, so it's basically cider, but pears, right? So it's whatever percentage cider is.
Like 5 or 6.
So essentially, you might as well have bought cider, but, I mean, it's cheap. And Lambrini girls have...
Probably get drunker off of 3 bottles of wine.
Let's try. Let's have an empirical, like, study for this.
I remember travelling to Germany and going into a video game shop, and there's an enormous PC section, and the bargain bucket there was full of actually good things. And
they've misunderstood this.
And the walls are full of like the old giant boxes that you know people get really nostalgic about in this country. That trade still totally exists in Germany for sim games. So stuff like Farming Simulator will have big boxed copies on shelves in mainstream German game stores.
In my day, games came in boxes that were bigger than your house. And you'd have to because you couldn't fit the box inside your house,
you
just had to move your house
snail?
inside the box. No? Would that explain it?
Well, yeah. Because I'm assuming that this is
is the snail shell
but
their house?
Literally, yeah.
Okay.
You could make it true for snails.
You can make this happen.
Yeah, no, that could
Listen,
be...
snail, I can make this dream come true. Jim will fix it.
But I was just going to say, is Sim Life likely to be on any, like, digital services? Because maybe this person could actually try it. Like, you know, years and
Be
years
disappointed freshly.
But, you know, it might be nice.
Maybe we could find a way to reunite this questioner with the game of their dreams.
Does that
But
sound
would that
a bit
invalidate
hard?
the grudge?
It sounds like a lot of effort.
It sounds
Let's
like
be honest.
a modicum of effort, and it might invalidate the grudge.
Yeah.
Quite
Yeah,
right.
this is not
Quite
this
right.
is not problems from problems. That's a section
It's
for
not
a
answers
future.
from questions.
It's not question time from question time.
Or wishes from listeners.
Horses.
Wishes from horses.
If wishes were horses, beggars were right. Obviously.
Grant the
Tom.
wishes of horses.
The wishes.
And they're all just for like carrots and sugar lumps and stuff. Alright, we've got a lot of those. Yeah, you
That's
can have
quite
them.
an easy podcast.
It's fine.
I love that the attempted Tom Senior, let's get this thing back on track, has been defiantly thwarted by the War Francis tangent axis.
We shouldn't be sitting opposite each other.
Yeah, we are like, well, I wouldn't say we're opposite. We're in different places.
You are,
No.
you are literally opposite, so.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. There you go.
We're just causing trouble.
And that's all of the just spiraling nonsense we have time for.
Yay!
If you would like to send us a question for a future episode of the Crate and Crowbar, you can do so by emailing us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also tweet us at Crate and Crowbar and hang out with our community on our Discord channel, the link for which is on our website at crateandcrowbar.com. Crate and Crowbar is very kindly supported by our Patreon backers. If you'd like to find out more about supporting the podcast and enabling us to do spin-off podcasts and so on, and some new projects soon to be announced, you can do so or find out more at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. This week, we're going to attempt a new form of plug and say that it would be very helpful for us if you enjoy the podcast and you use iTunes to rate and leave reviews for the podcast on there, because it does make the podcast more visible. And equally, we do have a YouTube channel. Currently, it's predominantly used for the YouTube versions of these podcasts, if that's how you prefer to receive your podcast. But nonetheless, likes and subscriptions there do make a difference to our visibility, and that's something that we'd like to make a little bit more of, which is why I've said those words in that particular order. If you would like to follow us as individuals, I am at C Thurston on Twitter. That's CTHURSTEN. Pip is...
I'm at Philippa War, which is at PHILIPPAWARR.
Nice.
Smooth.
Tom.
Any Tom.
Tom
At
F
Tom.
is at Pentadact, PENTADACT.
And Tom S is at PCG Ludo, which is LUDO.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I appreciate you putting more effort in this time, Tom Senior.
Thank you very much. I've learned my lesson.
Wait, what did you do last time?
Listen to the end of the Miniatures podcast.
Yes, listen to our wonderful Miniatures podcast.
Oh yeah, we should
I
plug
guess
that
if
as
there's
well.
only two of you, then...
Yeah, well, quite.
Or one of you
It's
slacks.
called Miniatures Monthly, and we talk about adventures in hobby with tiny plastic people that we paint and do wars with.
Usually we manage to silo off all of the Warhammer stuff
And yet
into
today
that.
And
we've
yet
found a
somehow it
way.
gets Also,
Yes.
Miniatures Monthly features an amazing theme song by Mike Debenham, provided completely unbidden, but nonetheless amazing.
It's wonderful. And just listen to it for that
Reason
alone.
alone. Miniatures Monthly is now available on iTunes and YouTube as well, which it wasn't previously, so you can get that now. I appreciate we've never done a longer bit than this after Thanks for Listening.
Yeah, I thought the podcast was over. I didn't realize this was being recorded.
No, to the point, well, it's a plug, Tom. We either did the plug to nobody but the people in this room, or we did it to everybody out there at home. But nonetheless, I think this probably requires us to say goodbye again.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks for
Then
listening.
thanks for listening, everybody.
Oh, that kind of goodbye.